Welcome to the Core Outdoors podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rawles. On this podcast, you'll hear the stories and experiences of entrepreneurs and leaders in the outdoor industry. In these conversations, we'll discuss insights and actionable strategies to give you the knowledge and inspiration to navigate your journey of entrepreneurship in the outdoor industry. This podcast is brought to you by CORE, the Kootenay Outdoor Recreation Enterprise. CORE is a nonprofit organization based in the Kootenay region of British Columbia. CORE's mission is to support the growing network of gear and apparel makers, designers, and entrepreneurs within the Kootenays. This episode is a conversation with Carina Hamel and Robby, the wife and husband partners behind Bivo, the performance hydration company that hit the market in 2020 with the first of its kind stainless steel water bottle built specifically for cycling. In this conversation, we'll talk about the early R&D that went into creating a stainless steel bottle that outperforms plastic bottles, their grassroots tactics to build a following before even creating a product, the heartbreak of a faulty first production run, the power of live events to find your customers, and a lot more. I've been following Bivo from their start, and I'm happy to finally get to sit down with Carina and Robby to hear more details from behind the scenes of how they launched and grew Bivo into a successful company in such a short amount of time. Please enjoy this conversation with Carina Hamel and Robby, founders of Bivo. Carina and Robby, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. It's been a long time. We were just chatting before we recorded that. I met Robby almost a decade ago at Outdoor Retailer when he was trying to get his foot into the door of the outdoor industry. So congrats, you're here, you've made it for over a decade. So it's pretty awesome to connect with you guys. But before we jump into like your story of Bivo, I just want to get an understanding so everybody understands what we're talking about when we talk about Bivo. So can you explain what your product is?
Yeah, so it's a stainless steel cycling bottle. We call ourselves a performance product company, but we entered into the water bottle space. It's the first water bottle designed for cyclists, and we've engineered the flow of water so that you can pour and drink really easily.
Your story of the product is pretty awesome in the sense of like you've created something brand new in the category. Can you just tell us the story about how it is that it came about? How did this bottle just appear in your lives?
Yeah, I can start with a little background of how we both entered the outdoor market. So I worked at the parent company of Keen Footwear. I met the owner of Keen and was moved to China. I was a cross-country ski racer. And then after I finished that career up, I moved to China for 3 months. And I was living in and out of the factories, going just to oversee production and see really the manufacturing process. And so then from China, I was moved to Portland, Oregon, and I was in the innovation group there for 5 years. And a huge part of my job was setting up new manufacturing relationships and finding new manufacturing techniques, and then putting those into inline Keen. So while I was there, I noticed that it was really hard. That like piece of the business of establishing relationships with factories is a really challenging one. And it's also super important for a product company because it can make or break your brand. So when I realized that, I decided to go out on my own and help smaller brands find factories and then ultimately develop their product. So right around that time of leaving Keen and starting my old business 9, I met Robby. He was working at Icebreaker Merino, and 2 years after I started that business, Robby joined, and we helped brands anywhere from creative direction through to production. So we worked with brands, small brands like startups, all the way up to larger companies such as Sperry Topsider. So we had a big range of companies that we worked with, and really got a good crash course into the do's and don'ts of running your own business. So it was a really great background for us to launch our own product company. So then we had our first kid in 2018. And after coming back from having her, I was honestly having a bit of a hard time coming back to work. And I had been running that business for 10 years. So it was like I think I honestly needed a little bit of a shift to come back to work and make it a meaningful thing for me to do. At the same time, she was starting daycare, and she was like the most challenging child to feed a bottle. And so she was rejecting everything. And we really didn't want to feed her out of plastic. So we had to test like bottle after bottle, and she just was rejecting all of them. And we
owned all of the bottles in the market. I swear, like every.
Yeah. Are we talking like specific for kids bottles or like
Baby
any bottle that you could?
Like infant, like want to drink milk out of this bottle. I only drink milk to survive. Like that phase of her life, like that we owned every bottle and gizmo and gadget.
Yeah.
She never took one.
Like I had to go back to daycare to feed her. Like I had to just leave her for 2-hour periods because she refused to eat anything other than from me. So it was like a pretty big challenge in our lives. It was like very overwhelming type time in our daughter's life. So we tested a whole bunch and we were talking about how we didn't want to feed her out of plastic. And we were talking about this while we were out skiing up on Mount Hood. And so we like stopped and took a drink of water from my old drink belt that was like had black mold around the rim. It was just gross. Or like every time we exercise, we're drinking out of plastic. And so we like quickly went home. A lot of our friends were huge cyclists. We were living in Portland, Oregon at the time. Portland's a huge cycling city. So we like started doing some research and we realized that there wasn't a solution for drinking while exercising, like performance hydration really. So we dove right in and we had a team already. So we had 7 people based in Portland and 3 people in China. So we had the resources to find a factory and we had the resources to design and develop the product.
Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, like, Carina alluded to this, but like she came back after having Soya, our first kid, and wanted a new challenge. And we like had this, we worked with this like business leadership consultant, and like long story short, like the conclusion was we allocated like 20% to other. Like that, like 20% of our time was going to go to this thing that we didn't know what it was going to be. And like Bivo smacked us in the face. So we were like, I would say like pretty giddy and excited when that happened. We were prepared to do something. We just had no idea what that was. So yeah, cliche light bulb moment from like weird, infant bottle, anti-plastic, like thoughts moving around our head to like jumping in. I think 6 weeks later, we had our industrial designer that we worked with, like sketching stuff around it. And yeah, we went after it quickly because that's
all. So inside this, so you had this agency that was basically shoe development and manufacturing. So you're saying that inside of that agency, you had kind of allotted this 20% free space that you could, you or your employees could develop?
Yeah, for me and Robby specifically. So it was like, I do really well with no boundaries. So like, it was kind of like when I first met Robby, he was like, what is this girl doing? She just goes to Powell's books and reads business books all the time. And that's literally what I did, or just like read business books. And then my agency kind of came out of that process. And so that works really well for me. And I was super excited about it. And then we really had no idea. Like we had, I think, we had been working with so many startups and we'd seen so many products. And we're like, how can you possibly come up with something novel? Like the idea of that actually felt very daunting. And so we had no idea but what it was going to be, but it happened way faster than we expected it to happen. Like, honestly, I think it took 2 months and all of a sudden we're like, okay, here it is.
It's like the mindset shift, I think, right? Like we allocated that time and then like it's like permission. So like when that idea struck us, we were like, not like, should we do this? Should we not do this? We decided to. We were just waiting for this thing to attract us, I guess, and pop up. So. And
were you looking specifically for a physical product to bring to market, or was this 20% like kind of free space? Just it could be anything, or were you looking like, okay, we've got this great agency. From the outside perspective, agencies seem like pretty dreamy business models. Were you looking for a hard good or like some type of physical product to release into the world?
I think we didn't totally know, but I think we assumed that the answer to that was yes, because that was our world. We were so focused on product. We definitely didn't want it to be shoes. We were like, I think because we had seen so many ideas, we just didn't think it was possible for us to do a footwear brand. But we had absolutely no clue it was going to be water bottles.
Sure. Yeah. You actually bring up a really good point. And so when you're working as a contractor with all these other brands, you get to see a lot of the like inside baseball of the do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
Which is a very good advantage for starting a new brand.
Absolutely.
You take your pick, which you'd want to answer, but what are you pick do's or don'ts. I'd love to hear a couple of things that you learned by being a contractor on the outside of a business, seeing what happens inside of a business that you were able to bring with you to Bivo.
I mean, I think the thing that like we continue to preach to this day, and it's kind of like how we create product, is like we didn't start in like the creative direction design briefing world with Carina's agency. We like morphed into that because we just felt like people kept asking for products and they had no idea why they were creating them. Like, who is it for? What's the use case? And I think like that has become this like theme of ours that we learned really well, which is just like dig in, like, why is this why should it exist? Like, are we just blending two styles from last year to create something new and hope people buy into the fact that it's new? Like, it just honestly felt a little bit guilty, I would say, like having been part of that, as well as like trying to create an agency model that was like, let's dig into that why, like what is the case for this product. So that was a huge lesson, I would say, for us. And I think we have four styles in Bivo. It's like, it's so great compared to like all of the different materials and SKUs and sizes and footwear. It feels very manageable too, which I think was very intentional from our days in footwear, and just like the breadth of SKUs and what that costs from a resource standpoint, from like a product line management standpoint. Just like navigating that world is tricky. So we landed in a pretty simple model, which is great.
I think there's two that I have that really stand out, and we really come back to this first one a lot, in that we saw many brand startups in particular have like a really good product, but they forgot the sales team, or they had a really good product and they forgot the marketing piece of it. And so I think that we always came into wanting, if we ever had our own brand, to making sure we didn't forget like a core piece of the business. And that may sound kind of simple, but it's actually really easy to like brush off the things you don't understand. Like we didn't know PR. Like that was something we came in having absolutely no, like I didn't even know what PR did really, other than like, it gets into magazines and stuff. But like I didn't know the day-to-day of what you would do for PR. And so we hired a PR agent. And so that was a great way for us to get off the ground, because it was a piece of the business we didn't understand. So hire an expert. If there's a piece of the business that you don't understand, I think pulling that person in who does understand it is a really smart decision.
It was like a healthy fear was instilled of not checking all the boxes, I would say.
Yeah.
As when you're in the startup world, and 75% of our clients in the agency were in that space, it's so easy to miss it. It's so easy, I think, and I still do this, like totally guilty, like fall into my strength or the place that I like working, rather than doing some of the things that I don't know how to do. Like you just have to be hyper conscious of that. So I think, yeah, we had some fear there that was really healthy.
Nice.
Yeah. And then,
go for it, Carina.
I was going to say my other one is it's actually like kind of a combination of learning from our agency and also learning from Bivo. But Robby likes to say we're scrappy but strategic, and that's like we didn't do a big like VC funding round. We've done this. We funded our business for the first 18 months, and then we took in a small friends and family round. And we've had to be very scrappy because of that. And while that's often quite stressful and hard, it also makes us think all the time about how we spend our money. A good example is we did our own website. We didn't hire a web developer. We didn't really have that skill set. Actually, we kind of taught ourselves how to do all of that. But the amount of money that saves us from like website updates, we can just go in and do that ourselves now, instead of going to the agency who we might have hired to make those updates. So there's certain things like you have to spend money where you need to, but then you also have to like look at where you can save money.
Yeah.
Amazing. You've touched on, I definitely want to go back to the marketing and website thing in the future, because when I think about Bivo, that is the thing that stands out to them. Like the product is very cool. It is amazing. And you've created a new category, but the way that you're going about the marketing and your website itself, it is amazing. And to hear you say that you did it yourself, that was going to be one of my questions. I'm shocked. It is so pro, but we're going to talk about that in a second, because I really want to get back to,
yeah, sounds good.
I really want to get back to the product development phase, because you make a good point about where you've got this idea. And I think there's what happens a lot in especially physical product startups and outdoor and cycling, is that it's like a garage tinkerer, and it's an amazing idea and it's all hard good, or the project itself is like key. And then it's like, let's go to market. Brr, what happened? I don't know anything about sales, marketing. So I think those lessons that you learned are that's a big advantage to get from the beginning. But I do want to hear about the development phase itself. So it was relatively quick. You had this idea. Here it is. We got to come up with this bottle, like bam. But it's unique. Like there's nothing else that exists. You've got to figure out how to make a stainless steel bottle squirt water out like a plastic. Like how do you do that? Because there's some engineering that's come into this.
I would say that we were very guilty of thinking it was going to be easier. I think you tried to, our job for a lot of our clients in the agency before is like build out calendars. And like, we know how a footwear calendar works. It's going to be 18 months. We're going to like, blah, blah, blah.
We always like to push. We
did push the calendar a lot, but we thought it was going to be 6 months that we'd like develop this. There's a lot less moving parts. There's a lot less materials that you're working with. It took us 18 months. We joke footwear, like the tolerances in footwear are measured in millimeters, then the tolerances in like a water bottle are measured in like 0.1 millimeters, and like that's the difference between leaking and not leaking. So like I would say my head exploded a little bit in like the shift from footwear to this. But how did we do it? I mean, we spent a ton of time early on just talking to people. So Portland happened to be this great cycling space. So like we call it like key stakeholder interviews, but we talked to everyone and we took notes about everything. And then we did focus groups, like a commuter focus group, like a super, as we classified, like avid biker, put them in like they race, so they have fun racing. Maybe they're not like super competitive, but they're biking a ton. We learned a lot so we could like define those characteristics that we wanted. And then we tinkered like crazy. We're not 3D modelers, so we ended up hiring an external engineer that, like, and you'll probably know from our marketing stories, happened to be an ex-NASA engineer, which became this like really incredible marketing story that we could like use. He did so much 3D modeling for us. We'd come up with ideas and he'd build them and we'd 3D print them. And then Peter, who was on our team, and Queen and I, we'd cut them apart and hot glue them together and like do this and that. We'd meet next week and say, we need it to look like this. We had to do that for months and months and months on end. It was really hard to get water to stay in a bottle without leaking and come out really fast. But those were our two biggest objectives. Like one, it can't leak. It has to come out fast. And I would say like something we take into all our design is like brutally simple. And, we landed on something. And I think one of like the key benefits to our consumers now is it's simple. It pulls apart. It can go in the dishwasher. It's really easy to clean. Like that was something we heard loud and clear from all those interviews and focus groups. Like, hey, I throw away my plastic bottles, not because they break, but because they just taste disgusting and I can't clean them. So like we had to make something that lasted longer and tasted better just by that alone. So yeah, we have this kind of philosophy of like balancing performance and health and sustainability. Like this idea really came out and like sparked out of this moment of not wanting plastic in our life, feeling like, it was very unclear 6 years ago, like there was less studies around like what is it specifically doing to your body, but we were of the mindset it shouldn't go in a dishwasher, we shouldn't use it in our lives, let's get rid of it. So it like came out of this like health pillar, if you will. But we're both athletes at heart. Like Carina was a professional Nordic skier. I grew up alpine ski racing. Like we still love to run and bike. The last thing we could do is say like, Christian, like let's pull over on the side of the road and use 2 hands to drink out of my bottle. Like that just felt like it doesn't matter how great you make this like, quote unquote eco bottle or whatever solution to the plastic cycling bottle. If you can't like incorporate performance in it, it's just never going to be adopted. We're very fortunate that like the materials that are in water bottles like allow you to use you can use great materials compared to footwear. Like stainless steel lasts a heck of a lot longer. It tastes a lot better. It's dishwasher safe.
Highly recyclable. Infinitely recyclable.
Yeah. So yeah, the long story short is a lot of tinkering and a lot more tinkering than we thought, and just kept beating it up until we were not completely confident. You always have to have that level of like uncertainty when you launch it. But
tinkering, hot gluing, cutting apart things. How often were you going back to people and showing them potential, prototypes? Like, hey, what about this? What about that? Or did you do kind of the research prior to, and then kind of go into secret mode, do the development, and then come out with like, ta-da, here it is? Or were you incorporating that market research throughout the design process?
I would say we were incorporating it probably less broadly than we were right at the beginning. But I think, I remember us having discussions about this at one point. And like, if you don't show people you just don't know what's going to happen 18 months later. And it felt a little bit reckless on something so novel and so different. Like it could flop. So like, I'd say we tightened our group, but we talked to a bunch of people. Like,
you know who we used a lot, actually, more for like cage fit, but was River City Bicycles. They were like a block and a half away from us. They're a big bicycle shop in Portland. And it's great. They're super influential, very opinionated in a good way, bike shop. And they were great because they would just like, they laughed at us. They would like see us coming in. Oh, here they come again, trying to fit this bike bottle in a bike cage.
They got a new 3D print. Oh, it looks like they put duct tape on it this time. We're in there testing it in cages. Like now we sell in River City, which is awesome. And like the joke is like the little like Bivo shrine because it's like above the cages where like we spent our time going over and utilizing all the cages that they sold to see how our prototypes fit. So I think you can't be too afraid. Obviously, like that probably depends on the thing you are creating.
One thing we did do during the development of our bottles was we actually sponsored the Cyclocross Crusade in Portland, Oregon. So that's a big cyclocross race series. And we had a tent, we had all of our branding stuff, and like we had a list for people to sign up on the email for emails, and we didn't have a product. We didn't have like we didn't have like prototypes to show.
Wait a minute, hold on. You just had you created a brand, and you had a tent, and you had no product to represent. You just said, we're branding an idea. Did you tell them what the idea was?
Yeah, we told them it was metal water bottles for bikes. Yep.
But the hilarious thing is like that's a really like hard. It was so foreign, right? Like we showed up with a fire pit, we had marshmallows, and we were like, let's just get people like engaged. Somebody told us that the best thing in marketing is to capture emails. We're like, that seems like a great idea. We'll do that too. And we'll just like use these people as not to like say guinea pigs, but we're like, if some of them could identify our logo, that was a win. If some of them could give us tidbits of like their mind on like why they're scared of a metal bike bottle, that'd be a win. So yeah, it's funny looking back now, like,
and I would 100% do it again. It was definitely worth it to do that. We did bike washes, so we had bike competitions. So that one of the problems at the races, they're super muddy most of the time, and one of the problems is that the wash station lines get really long. And so we had a competition. We had 2 hoses with a judge. Peter was the judge usually, and we would spin the wheel after they did a minute-long wash of their bike. And we'd like pick the derailleur or something. And Peter would analyze the derailleur and say which one got the better clean job. And then we had stickers. One said "You're hosed," and the other said "Reigning Champion" with Rain RAIN. And so it was like all water-based fun. And so it was like a really great way to just get the name out there. And it definitely helped when we launched because we had a pretty decent email list by the time we launched Bivo.
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's such a good idea. So you basically created a brand and had no product, but you were out there capturing it. Your target market. You're already like speaking to your target market and getting feedback from them. And I don't want to gloss over all of the development and heartache and I'm sure late nights and early mornings that went into like figuring out how to get your bottle to fit into. Not only is it going to squirt water out, do as good a job or better than a plastic bottle, it's got to fit into all these different cages in the world. Like I'm sure there's a whole hour-long conversation about just through the development phases for sure. Like knowing having experienced all these, the ups and downs of the product development. What is something that you would recommend to somebody else who's about to go through that process? Is there something that sticks out, or are there kind of a key couple learnings throughout that design and development process that you would say? Keep this in mind, or always remember this.
Starting with asking so many questions would be like recommendation number 1. Like, I think you don't know what you're going to be able to achieve when you go into the development process. Like, it depends on your manufacturing methods and how you're molding this and what your materials are. But like starting with that list of like, ideally, here's what we're trying to achieve. And it's based off of not my personal preferences, it's based off of people telling me this that are like the consumer demographic we're going after. I think that was a big thing that we did. And then I think the other thing is like, be prepared to blow up what you put a lot of work into. And I think like I'm maybe too guilty of this at times. Like I don't want to commit to a design sometimes because I'm still trying to poke holes in it. And absolutely, you're never going to get to 100%. You've got to like roll the dice and go. But we had so many like interesting novel ideas, and they were good, I think, in some capacity. But like we kept coming back to like, what did people tell us? Oh, they throw away their plastic bottles because they get gross. We have to make this thing disassemble really easy. Like that's a super cool concept that could make it more leak proof and flow really well, but like it totally misses this priority. So I think those two things, and like just being willing to like, you kind of have to give up on some cool ideas sometimes and keep coming back to like, no, this is like, we did agree that this made a lot of sense. So that can be frustrating because I feel like you're like 5 steps forward and then you're like, let's go backwards a little bit and like add a couple of things that I learned. That's probably why it took 18 months instead of 6 months, if I'm being honest.
18 months sounds pretty fast to me, honestly, for what you developed.
Yeah, I think for me, just like from my agency days too, and like making any product, definitely be visiting your factory. Like that is a really, if you miss that relationship, it can cripple your brand. So I would say don't pick a partner without visiting them.
Yeah. Which was funny. Carina's other, we'll just throw it in here, it's like mostly a joke. Like her, like one thing with new clients in our footwear agency is like your first production run, you must be there. Like you have to be present. You have to go over there. Like you just don't know what is going to happen until you turn that switch on and you go from making 1, 2, 3, 10, 20 units to 2 to 3,000 plus units. We didn't go to the factory because it was COVID. We could not go. So we like broke Carina's like one rule. Turns out all of our stuff showed up and had a problem. Like 2,000 bottles that we were going to launch with, and I think it was August. We'd done pre-orders, super psyched, like literally 24 hours before one of our connections emailed us and was like, hey, this cool tactile coating that you have in your bottles is like peeling off like saran wrap. It was the silicone coating. And we like ran down, at this point we're living at Carina's parents' house in Western Massachusetts, to the barn we're storing all these in. And sure enough, like it was just peeling off. Like you could just rub your thumb. And this is literally like 24 hours before we launched the website. So we pulled the plug and had to delay. It would have been great if we could have gotten the factory. I'm sure we would have figured that out.
Oh, the heartbreak. I'll go. So reconfirming the number one rule.
Yep.
Yes.
Go to the factory before. Good on you for pushing through, even in COVID. Lesson learned.
Yeah.
So that's massive. So you hit the brakes. What did you do to recover from the manufacturing errors?
Actually, it's pretty amazing. So we had to email everyone who pre-ordered and say we found this defect. We don't stand behind the product, so we're not going to ship it. So we offered for them to either keep their order and wait for shipment like 3 to 4 months later, or we would return their purchase. And I think we had like 2 or 3 people who returned their purchase. It was awesome.
It was really cool.
And in some ways, like it was awful. Like, I mean, it was devastating. It was at that point, it was our own, like, it was all of our own money. So, and we had, a 18-month-old and, it was COVID and things were scary. And so it was just like a really awful time. But in many ways, looking back, it was a great way to show how much we stand behind our product. And I think the customers that did order really gained trust from us in that process. So we wrote a very honest email and we got a lot of like really nice emails back cheering us on. And then we figured out the problem and we were able to get our official launch done in December. So I think it was just in time for Christmas, actually, in December. Yeah.
This is all to like, ideally we were launching during bike season, and then it was August, which kind of felt late already, and then it was Christmas. But honestly, like you just got to get it out there. It worked in the end.
Yeah. It's amazing too how my perceived understanding of how people are going to react to bad news or react to anything. Really, I'm so wrong all the time, and it's amazing how sometimes it just feels like it feels so big for us as the entrepreneur and as the person behind the business. And people are so forgiving and so understanding. It's always a good reminder for me that people are down, especially when they're small. Like people love to buy from people.
Yeah.
And when you're the faces and the voices behind the brand, they get it. It's amazing the amount of grace that you can get from your customers. And I think it's actually more endearing
Yeah.
in the long term for
Yeah.
their customers to see your honesty
Yeah.
and to see that, they're going through the ups and downs with you in those ways.
Yeah.
I assume that there's some technology in this bottle that is made of metal and still can shoot water out like a plastic water bottle. Do you have any IP? Like, is there any protection in your IP, and how do you think about patents and IP as a small brand?
That's a great question. Yes, we do. We have a patented utility patent, so like not a design patent, like on the engineering side of it. It's like such an interesting question because it's still something I feel like I'm learning to this day. Every time I talk to our patent attorney, I'm like, I learned something new. I think it's something you absolutely need, depending on your product, obviously. But what comes and how you use that is the challenging part. When somebody infringes, or if they infringe, or how much money you're going to spend into it, because it's just like it's an endless pit that you can throw money into. I feel like to just patent this and patent that, and like you have to be. We got very fortunate to get connected to an attorney that specializes in patents that is also one of our customers demographic. Like he's an avid bicyclist and he gets it. And I think it's been really key to like, as much as he's our patent attorney, he's also a strategic partner in terms of like how we think through the strategy there. And I think that's a huge puzzle because like we could go make another lid and maybe we shouldn't patent it. You know, we are small and scrappy and have like a small budget. Like you have to look at like, how much are we going to sell it here? Is it worth it? Like what's already in the market? And like, is this like the best use of our funds, or do we put that into sales and marketing? So yes, we do have a patent. I'll be very interested to see how it plays out. Like, you know, using that, protecting ourselves. I think that's to be determined a little bit, but we're prepared and ready to, you know, we've covered the bases.
And I don't like to focus on competitors too much because I think it can be an early distraction for entrepreneurs. I think I made that mistake early in my career too, is focusing on my competitors too much. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a point worth kind of exploring a little bit in the sense of that there are obvious players in your water bottle market, which seems to be all the rage right now. Good for you. Rising tide lifts all boats. Mm-hmm. How do you think about competition in that way? And are you already seeing Bivo is being recognized and being seen by others? Like how are you seeing that you're getting copycats, and how are you dealing with those? When we
came up with the idea, honestly, a lot of people said, well, we like another metal water bottle. Like there's already so many out there. But honestly, this is a new category. We're labeling it performance hydration, and it's like this metal is foreign on bikes. And so that's one of the hurdles for people to accept it as a bike bottle, is that it's made out of metal instead of plastic. And so for some people that's awesome, and those early adopters they really jumped right on board. But then for other people, they need more convincing. And so we are seeing competition come in. There's a Hydro Flask bottle, there's Camelback bottle, but it's interesting because it's honestly just like validating the category. And it also is just making that category a bigger pie. And so hopefully our piece of that pie just continues to grow. So while it's scary to have competition, I actually compare this to being an athlete too. And I also don't really like to compare ourselves to competition, because you kind of just have to focus on yourself and do the best that you can do. And like some days one racer might have a bad race and you beat them, but it doesn't mean that you had a good day. It's just that they had a really bad day. And so like, what can we focus on with our bottles, and our brand, and how do we like just build that on our own without worrying too much about competition? So I do have that like in my head, but I also recognize you have to be smart and make sure you're paying attention to what's out there. So we found that it's actually, we think it's a good thing.
Real quick, the indicators look like it's helping actually. And I think Carina, like she said, there's two barriers. It's like metal is weird on a bike, and then $40 is weird against the $15 plastic water bottle. So, I'll be the first to admit we're small, and our marketing budget's probably a drop in the pool compared to some of our competition. Like they're going to help us get over those hurdles, like make that a thing that is no longer a barrier, that you walk over the bike space in REI, and you're like, yeah, it makes sense that I get it. It's not like this foreign object that seems expensive in comparison. You're like, yeah. So I think it's helpful, and we got to lean into that. Like, it's inevitable. Always, somebody told you this, but it's like, you got to be first, best, or cheapest. Right now, I think we're, well, for sure first, and we want to be best or like equivalent. I think like as long as you can hold those places, and like we are really just doubling down, and we can get to this in the marketing side, like creating loyalty, creating a brand beyond a product. It's something that can compete with the Goliaths, because like we don't have the resources as the big ones out there, right? But like we sure as heck can create something that people want to buy into that's bigger than a bottle.
First, best, or cheapest. I like that. Recognizing that the competition is there, but somewhat putting the blinders on and just ignoring it. I think it's super important to not get distracted and just focus on what you can do. We've kind of gone through this phase of you've built this bottle, you've got it out, a bit of a stumble out of the starting block, but you've recovered, you've launched it. I want to move into more of like kind of that growth phase for Bivo and how you actually came to market. So it's, you did these amazing ideas with gathering email lists before launch. And talk to me about how you were going into how are we going to launch this thing in the market? Was it a direct-to-consumer brand first? Was it a hybrid model of direct-to-consumer and wholesale? Like, what was the strategy behind bringing Bivo to market? And then how are you going to gain that momentum over time?
COVID kind of helped make this decision for us. We spent those 18 months getting ready, and COVID struck, and we pumped the brakes. We had all our life savings like on the line going into Bivo. And it just seemed like too scary to go all in during a pandemic. But anybody that watched the bike industry, it soared really quickly and it exploded. And it felt like this is like exactly the right time to do it. But that also meant that like the world was different. Stores were opening and closing depending on regulations. And like, we didn't know what was going to happen in the bike world. And it felt like, or in the bike world as it relates to like wholesale, like brick and mortar retailers. So we chose to go very much on direct to consumer. And I think it was right for the time, obviously. But it also helped us like focus, I would say. It's really hard and easy to spread yourself too thin really quickly, trying to hit multiple channels. So it allowed us to be really focused, and wholesale grew word of mouth. So our first 12 months, we did not focus on our first year. We did not focus on wholesale at all. And once in a while, we'd get people reaching out, and we started to say yes, and it just started to snowball. And by the next year, we were towards the end, and we had like 30 to 40 retailers just by word of mouth. And we're like, wow, okay, like we should probably do something with this. So we hired somebody internal to help, but we quickly realized that like once we did that, one person couldn't be everywhere. And we were still kind of like resisting this. Like, are we really going to go into hiring a bunch of sales reps and agencies? We since then have hired a fractional VP of sales. And last year we went from 0 sales reps to 28 sales reps in 1 year. And like that went from 30 to 40 doors to 200 retailers. So I would say like strategically we started small. And like, I would say like one thing that we like continuously do, like no matter what like the decision is, like experiment. Like let's test this and make sure that like it makes sense. So like that word of mouth wholesale like help prove out that like, okay, people want this, they understand it, they can sell through it, they're coming back for reorders, like it's positive here. Yeah, it showed us that it was worth putting money into, if that makes sense. And that it gave us enough like leeway to build the resources to do it, I think, too.
Right. So starting with the focus on D2C allowed you to then have some resources and some testing to be able to be really effective in the wholesale rollout.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how did you go ahead?
And for the launch, we had that email list. We had been spreading the word in Portland the best we could. We also had really good connections in the cycling world. So I think like that's one to really lean into, where you have connections, lean on them, because my parents growing up, they had an old dairy farm that they didn't use it all for farming at the time. And so we had a ski course on the property. Then when I left after like in college, they shut that down and they opened it up to cyclocross courses. And so they had in Western Massachusetts some of the best riders in the country were from Western Mass. So Jeremy Powers and Emma Noble and Stephen Hyde, they were all training on my parents' property regularly. So even just like the connections through Portland cyclists, the connections through East Coast cyclists, there were enough people out there who are influential in the cycling space that we were able to like seed them bottles, and they posted about them. And that really drew a lot of attention to Bivo. So even though we didn't do any digital marketing stuff, we like just did our own like grassroots campaigns to launch and spread the word.
Wow. Good for you. So you had a good email list. What was that number? Do you know what number you launched with? Like how many thousands of emails you had just to get started?
I don't think it was thousands, actually.
Really? Good for you.
Maybe low thousand. Maybe.
If we were breaking 1,000, I think that was that'd be good.
Yeah.
So it wasn't huge, but I think like honestly, more than anything, it was just like we made ourselves willing to put ourselves out there and to start gathering information and like building some little ball of momentum in people's heads, even if it was tiny.
We also got written up. We did have our PR agency, and so we got written up in quite a few outlets that it was completely new. Like it was a totally new thing to talk about. And so it actually got written up about in several locations.
And that was one thing that we totally acknowledged we knew nothing about. Like that was one of our, to go back to like that instilled fear that we would not check some box. PR, the startups that we had worked with, the ones that had hired PR agencies right out of the gate did better. Like they got their stuff placed in the right areas to the right demographic, and it made sense.
We started with them early too, like before we launched. I would say, again, it was a connection. One of the former Middlebury ski team coach, Andrew Gardner, he left Middlebury and started his own press agency called Press Forward. He's also co-founder of a brand called Velocio. We started talking to him when we had the idea. So in 2019, we started talking with him about the idea. He was all game to be on board and be our PR agency. But then we started officially like paying them, I think, 3 months before launch to just like start seeding editors and create a strategy of how we're going to get into different media outlets. So that was a really good strategic decision too.
And so you said you didn't launch with any digital ads to start. You were just using your email list, using this PR firm that you're working with, seeding, who you can as the influencers in the target market.
Yep.
And then you just ran with it. So how long did it take from launch date on the website to, how many months into it where you're like, okay, we're actually selling a fair number of bottles here, when you're like, or this is going to work? Yeah, I know you took pre-order, so you had that kind of initial early sales, but like where in the life cycle of the launch were you like, okay, this is working, we're onto it?
I would say it was pretty early.
I would say right away.
Right away. Yeah. I mean, I think part of that, it's funny, PR helped validate that, right? Like the fact that people could write about it and they're like, this is new and there's a position, and people were into that. Like we've seen the PR landscape change as we've gone from like a very new and novel thing to 3 years later. It's like you can't just be like saying the same story that we're new, because I guess we're not anymore. But right out of the bats, it got people thinking, and it showed us that there was that opportunity. So it gave us confidence to lean into it. The sales, like any business, it was small in the beginning, but like I think we could see that like the momentum was there. We had to figure out how to keep connecting. We had to figure out how to get eyeballs on Bivo, to be honest. Like tell our story. Like we're over here, we're trying to shout and scream.
Have you carried that same philosophy out, or have you adapted as you've moved into 3 years of business? And I'm sure budgets have gotten a little bit bigger. Audience is obviously much larger. You've got a track record. Are you still using that same philosophy, or have you adapted to new ones, and are you trying different things now?
Yeah, we're trying different things. It's actually pretty crazy how quickly it has shifted, I think, even in the 3 years of us being in business. So like we find that influencers, like a random influencer posting about Bivo, it honestly doesn't move the needle anymore. Like it did then, it doesn't now. Our ambassador program, we have probably 15 athletes, and they don't have to be like they don't have to be 10,000 followers or more. I mean, we have several who have like 1,000 or 1,500. but they're really active people in their community. And that's one that has like held strong for us, is that, wow, that really moves the needle. Like we can tell when we talk to them or see their friends riding, like they're all using Bivo bottles. And so it's not just about influencing the social media market, but it's also just like being a positive player in your community. So that's one that we've really stayed true to. That one, I think, like we'll continue with for a long time. I think it really moves the needle.
I'd say there's this like shift in focusing on, I think some people will say like grassroots, but really focusing on building trust with our customers through like much as close as we can get to personal touch. And the Carina has since taken over PR. We no longer work with an agency, and that was
we hire them for contract.
We hire them for contract stuff. They're great. They're phenomenal. I would recommend them to anyone. But we saw this like change in like needing to do deeper storytelling, needing to have more personal touches, and Carina's great at that. Like the joke all the way back before the 4 agency, like that's like laugh, like that's what I thought she did. I was like, you just like network and talk to people and have coffee with them and read books, business books and Powell's. That's her like sweet spot, like connecting with
and making stuff happen.
No, but you made stuff happen. You that's how you got all your clients. Like you never spent any money in marketing because you leaned into storytelling, telling your story, telling what you were doing, and like we've really leaned into that from an ambassador standpoint. Same thing. It's not about getting. Sometimes it is. It's great if they have 100,000 followers, right? But I joke, and up in your woods, Christian, one of our first ambassadors, he introduced himself as the 100th follower of Bivo, and he's now a very good personal friend of both Carina and I. Single-handedly has created the Canadian market for Bivo. Like I will continue to tell him that. Like he's why we're in All Doors and MEC. He's why Bicicleta took us on. He's why a whole bunch of other ambassadors came to us and other specialty shops. Like, and he has, and I'm not trying to put Jody down, he has 4,000 to 5,000 followers. He's just an incredible community member, and like he builds trust. Like he focuses.
Who is? Give this guy a shout out. We need to hear about him.
Yeah, Jody Wilson. He's incredible. Like it just, again, it's all about personal touches, and he does that so well. And he showed up at Bivo because he believed in it, not because we were going to pay him. And that, like, those connections are priceless in creating, I think, the right type of momentum and the right type of like word of mouth trust from customer to customer to customer. So we've shifted more into that, and we still, the only digital advertising we do is on Google, and it's really, really small. And that's partially just because like searching metal bike bottle is something that makes a lot of sense to connect, but like we don't throw money elsewhere. We throw it into doing crazy, weird stuff that are more personal connections and touches and getting people in front of others, whether it's events or donating bottles for races as prizes so people can touch and feel. It feels slower, but like what comes out of it is deeper. So
totally. Yeah, I love it. You made a cross country road trip during the summer. You made it all the way back to your home state. You're from Montana, right, Robby?
Yeah.
So you were close. You made it close to here to where we are in the Kootenays, and made it all the way to Whitefish. Tell me about the. First of all, I love the idea. I mean, nothing will do more for sales than for the founders to get in a car and start visiting people. Like you'll just leave a wake of increased sales behind you as you drive through the country. So tell me about like what went into, well, first of all, bringing your family across country for a sales trip, but also like what was your thinking about, how did you go about planning it, and what were the results of this summer road trip?
Yeah, it's pretty funny because it was not a very planned thing. So I think we work with a mentor, Neil Bainton. He was the COO of MailChimp. We got connected to him through an accelerator program we did here in the state of Vermont, Launch VT. And he was our mentor through that. And then he's just stayed on and helped us from the time we were part of that program. And he's pretty amazing. He was COO, but he was I think he was the first employee at MailChimp, and he's more of a marketing genius than he is. I wouldn't say he would even call himself like an operations person, but anyway, so he actually like put the idea in my head in April. I remember because we were down in Florida visiting Robby's parents, and we were like, I started thinking about it and looking at it. I'm like, how the hell are we going to do this with our kids? Like we have a, at the time, Nolan was 1.5, Svea was 4, almost 5. And they're young. Like that's a lot to take 2 little kids across the country. They don't do very well in the car. So we're like, how can we possibly make this work? And then I feel like this is where Robby and I do kind of thrive, is that like, we just love a good challenge and like kind of chaos. And so we started planning it out and looked at what we could hit for events. And we'd seen the year before that events were a really good way. Like we did a lot of local events in Vermont, in New England. And it was just, I mean, we sell bottles there. Like we kind of laugh, we make it up, the number up, but I think it's like an 80% conversion rate at events. Like people see and feel our bottles and they buy them. Like they see the pour, because so when you open a Bivo bottle and you pour it out, it can empty in 21 ounces can empty in 8.5 seconds, which is faster than you can squeeze plastic.
But you can't
can't understand like how nice it is to drink out of until, or like you see it and it like clicks in people's heads. So being at events is really important for us. And so we created a list of events that we could hit across the country. Robby actually ended up driving west. I flew with the kids, and then we
Smart move.
Yeah. Although, and then we like kept joking back and forth. We're like, who has it harder? Me flying with 2 kids by myself, or Robby driving across?
Sure.
But
Good
anyway, so we flew, met him over there, and then we had a series of events, mostly like late July through August. But what was great was that we were attending events anywhere from gravel events to Ragbri, which is a big ride across the state of Iowa. It's a 6-day event, and that's like a totally different demographic in the cycling space. And so we learned a lot about what consumers were out there and how to like what was important to them. And we realized that there's this like whole part of the bike industry that brands don't actually really talk to. Like they sort of ignore it. They like. I mean, we do the top-down approach too, where we've seeded a lot of bottles to professional athletes, of course, because we're a performance product company. Like we have to have high-performing athletes use it. But there's also this like whole group of cyclists who just love to ride, and they go to a lot of different events, and brands don't show up. And so when we do, and they learn about us, they love it.
Ragbri was a great example. It was kind of like, it's in between Vermont and Montana, and 50,000 people do it. I have no idea what will happen. It was their 50th anniversary?
I think it was their 50th.
It was their massive
Probably.
anniversary.
It's been around for a long time.
Yeah, but it had no idea what to expect. My cousin from Minneapolis ended up driving down. I was like, I have a hotel room. Do you want to come hang out and maybe help me? We worked for 9 hours straight and sold more bottles at Ragbri by 3 times than we have at any other event, and sold out. And I was like, it was another light bulb moment. I was like, Carina, there are so many bikers we don't talk to, or we don't meet at these like Leadville 100, or which are also awesome races and really cool, but they're the super, super avid, very like elitist cycling events. And it was just fun to see. It's fun to see that it shifted everything. So it's like, again, to kind of go back to that like experiment thing, like we continue to keep trying to push ourselves to experiment into like new places. And when it clicks and works, it's like, all right, let's do that. She kept adding events to my road trip because that works so well. She's like, there's this one hotter than hell in Texas. Like you can go there, and then you're going to go back to Wisconsin. And it was like, yeah, that seems like the right way to get back to Vermont. But it worked. So yeah. Anyways.
Did you make it to hotter than hell?
Yeah.
Nice. I rode that when I was a kid. I grew up in Texas. I rode that thing. That thing's gnarly.
Oh my gosh. I didn't ride it. It was a vendor, but I went out. Everyone laughed at me at like 12:30 in the day. I was like 108, and I was like, I just need to go experience what it's like to bike near. I lasted like 25 minutes, and I was like, I can't do this. My body is shutting down. I'm going back.
Robby was not born for the heat,
and I'm not. No.
Yeah, it's just like biking into a hairdryer.
Yeah,
blasted with hot air.
Yeah,
that's amazing. One logistical question.
Yeah.
How are you selling bottles? Are you literally selling bottles like, here you go, or are they buying them online? You're literally selling them a bottle out of their hand.
Yeah, that has been, for us, I think it probably stemmed from like not having a lot of money to just throw at straight brand awareness. We're like, if we're going to go out to events, like we have to capture sales. Like that's the only way that we can do it, to be honest, or we're going to have to pick and choose a couple of them. luckily our product's small and light, and it's fairly easy to either carry with you or ship to. But yeah, we bring a like point of sale thing from our Shopify account and sell at every event, and it's awesome. Like
we find that events, if this may be helpful for people if they're looking at events, but we find events with expos like the day before the races, that's the way to go. Like the events that happen like on the day of the race, we find that we sell less product. So if there's like an expo the day or two before, that's always a good indicator that it'll be a good event.
I mean, I guess it's worth saying, Ragbri and Hotter and Hell and all these events, and being around all these different, I don't want to say levels, but groups of cyclists. Yeah. I think the big takeaway that I was thinking about in my head is like, bikes are so cool. You know what I mean? It's like you have people who are like world-class elite athletes, and you have people in their like 70s and 80s who just like to go ride their bike, and everybody in between. And it's amazing that you made a product that works equally well for all of them. So good job. I mentioned it earlier, your website. I'm shocked, honestly, that you developed that website by yourself and designed it yourself, because it is super pro. Like I love where you can compare bottles and what the different options are, and just the illustrations and the graphics behind what your product offering is super clear and super concise. And I feel like everybody should go look at your website, drinkbivo.com, because it's like a textbook case of how you should lay out a website for a product that may not be super clear from the beginning. You need to explain a little bit of why is this different and what's going on. And I think you guys have done an excellent job with that.
Thanks.
How did you do that on your own? Like a lot of Pal's books? What happened that made you be able to do this?
No, I think there's two things. There's like the back end of the website and just laying it out and getting functioning correctly, which we went with Shopify. And we did a ton of research on themes. So we paid for a Shopify theme that I would say we'll get to the maybe more important part, but we paid for a theme that had really good service connected to it. I think if you don't do that, you end up having to hire somebody sooner. So they like still exist. They're still a business. They still put out new themes. They have customer service. We can work with them if like they've got glitches. We don't have to go hire a developer to fix something that's like outdated and forgotten about. But picking like a good platform really helped in having the tools to work with. We
used out of the sandbox.
Out of the sandbox, yeah.
So it's like a separate out of the sandbox. It's a separate like theme developer, and then you can buy that and then use it for Shopify. So that was like Robby said, they update their themes for you essentially, so that we don't have to do that ourselves.
Out
of the sandbox, fantastic theme developers, now part of the Pixel Union Canadian company.
Nice.
So Out of the Sandbox is an American company, but they were acquired by Pixel Union, very cool company out of BC. Out of the Sandbox is genius. That's what we run our site. We run on a theme of theirs too. Can't recommend them enough. They're excellent and very wise to like go with a high quality theme. They're not even expensive.
No,
that's
it's not.
It's $500, which like in the grand, if you go talk to some other crazy startup that's maybe VC backed, they're throwing like $20,000 to $50,000 into a website. Probably more now. This is dated information. So yeah, we were pretty scrappy that way. But I think the big piece of the puzzle too is how it looks. We were really fortunate to have a good friend and colleague, Mark Beard, who we worked with for a long time in the footwear space. That is an incredible brand guru. He worked for Cinco Design out of Portland, and Carina got connected with him on some footwear projects where he was a creative director. He went on to be creative director at Herman Miller, has since then like broke back off and is doing his own thing. He's helped. He makes it look beautiful. Like
he serves as our brand director today.
Okay.
So like the beautiful photography, he's art directing that with a photographer friend back in Portland. He's helped with a lot of like the copy as well. So he's just got that eye that he makes it pop for sure.
Yeah.
Robby, you were right. It all comes back to Carina's networking and coffee times. It's all. This is the secret to success. Your network is your net worth.
Yeah.
I will say your branding. And I remember from one of your first emails that really came out with a ton of color. The back you were using these really beautiful monochromatic backgrounds with the water and the bottles, and it was stunning. and you still hold that up today. I mean, so the high level of design that you bring, I think adds a lot of credibility from the get-go to your brand, and it continues to do so. And you see that in color is a very important thing, obviously, for you to be able to differentiate and have a few more SKUs. I can see that's important for you too. But I find that design is sometimes one of the things that startups, unfortunately, kind of glaze over, because I think it, to a lot of people, it feels expensive, and it is, but it's sometimes you get what you pay for, and it's worth the investment. So on that idea of like color differentiation and product categories, you call yourself a performance
product company.
Performance product. Okay. So the future of Bivo, is it bottles and we're just going to create different sizes and insulated versions and non-insulated versions? Or are you willing to like share about where your product roadmap goes from here?
Yeah. So we started as a performance product company. Like, we're very intentional about picking those words, because we wanted to make sure that if we do come up with ideas outside of water bottles, that we can make other products. And so we certainly have other ideas about like how to carry our bottles, that kind of thing. We don't have anything like totally in the works right now. We do have a couple additional lids coming out that move our bottles outside of just like on the bike and a little bit more for every day. It's still like very performance focused. They still fit in bike cages, and we think about the flow rate and that kind of thing. But yeah.
Okay. I also want to clarify that I shouldn't say just bottles, because I think what you're doing is perfect. And it is, speaking as somebody who creates too many SKUs twice a year with seasonality, your business model is the dream physical good product model. It's like Red Bull, and right below Red Bull, it's Bivo. I think to me is like, limit the number of SKUs, be really good at what you're selling, and then just let it ride. I think is a wonderful business model. So I want to clarify that I don't mean just that. So if you never introduced anything but what you're doing now, I think it's a genius business model.
No, I think one of the things we actually learned at our agency was similar to what you're saying, is like, there are just too many products, and we do have limited resources. So we are like, we've been very strategic on focusing on the 4 bottles that we have. Like, we added the insulated bottle after we launched the single wall bottle, knowing that was something consumers would want. But we could go like totally like so broad, because we have tons of ideas. It's more just like, we have the resources we have a really awesome bottle to sell, and we have a lot of people that still need to find out about us. Yeah. So we are going really deep on the bottles that we have, and like trying to just find those additional consumers. That being said, we have lots of ideas too. We just have to filter through them.
Wherever we land, the reason like performance is in that sentence that Carina said is, it's so easy. And so many people have said like, oh, you're just creating another steel water bottle. And they're like, no. If you look at this space, there's nothing. And like, we don't want, very intentionally, when after cycling, so many people are like, well, why aren't you over in Hydro Flask territory yet? And we're like, because that doesn't make sense. Like, to us, it doesn't make sense. Like, to go after that is really hard. And we have this really clear brand story and product story around performance and what it means to like hydrate yourself really efficiently with something that like you just can't experience until you drink a Bivo. Like, we constantly are told like, wow, I drink more water. It's so nice to drink out of. Like, we want to make sure that we don't step right into that lifestyle category and have this like place that we can exist. So I think Carina mentioned this, but we've started to use the word performance hydration. And this is like this new category. And it's funny, like, you start saying it, people adopt it. In some of our large key accounts, we said that, and they just kind of nod and they go, yeah, you're right. It is a new space. And we're like, we're trying to carve that out, because we do believe that like the world of stainless steel water bottles hasn't been tuned for sport. It's been tuned more for lifestyle, just in how you drink, using 2 hands versus using 1 hand and having it come out really easily. So whatever we come up with, it'll definitely separate itself with that like performance and health and sustainability piece.
It's cool to have that discipline and to have that, from a brand perspective and a company perspective, to start out with something very clear. Like, it's a very clear mission. And it's amazing when you have clear values and a clear mission, those guardrails that it puts up for you, it actually makes life very easy, or not very easy, but much easier, because it's like, nope, everything runs through that filter. not doing that, not doing that, not doing that, because there's a lot of opportunities to be distracted. And if you're thinking about, okay, how else could we make revenue? You can, and we see it every day, and you just walk into a big box retailer, you'll see, oh, wow, they're doing that now. Okay. Interesting. And I applaud you for your discipline and staying focused. We could keep going for a long time. I have a lot of questions, but I have a couple of selfish questions that I want to ask because I find it very interesting. I run my business with my wife as well. You're a husband and wife team, 2 small kids. Congrats. How do you enjoy playing life on hard mode? You learn a lot about yourselves, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. I say it's like having a full length mirror in front of you. You get to see like all of your shortcomings. How do you set up your business, and how do you operate as business partners, but also as like husband and wife? Like, do you have silos? What does like work-life balance look like for you?
Okay. So when we first met, Robby and I, we thought we were like the same person. And we honestly, even through the first years of working together, we fought working together for quite some time. Like we'd go on vacation, or we'd spend, weekends away or whatever. And we would have all these conversations about ideas, like businesses we'd want to build, or like, and both of us are just kind of in that mindset often. And so we like kind of could see after we met that it was like sort of an inevitable thing for us to work together. And I think like both of us definitely had our concerns about it. And it was pretty cool because actually when we first met, or when we first decided to work together, we had quite a few friends who were couples owning the same business, or, working together. And so they would be like, hey, if you ever have any questions about how to do this, or like what you need to do, setting boundaries, like anytime. And we did have a few conversations with different couples about like, okay, how do you set boundaries? And one of the things that honestly we're pretty bad about right now, but we were really good about with our agency, was just like, you come home from work and you're done. We honestly can't do that right now. And I think that has shifted because, we're really excited about Bivo, and it's a startup. Like you have to be working on it. I mean, it's in your head all the time. And the other thing is we do have kids. And so like our schedules are more broken up because we have to like leave work and pick up the kids, and you can't just go home at any time you want. You have to go home at an exact time. So work doesn't necessarily stop at the time that you need to leave. But when we are like tired or just like need a break, we're both very open and honest with each other about saying like, look, I'm done today. You can't talk to me about this. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Yeah. And we're like good. We're like, we don't take offense to that.
No, we've gotten very good with that. I remember us having conversations in Portland, Oregon. It was the drive from the office to home. That was like gears swapped. And we were actually really good about that boundary when we went home. And now it definitely is a slippery slope to like, it's always on our mind. I think it's different with Bivo and our own company, if you will. But yeah, you have to be willing to talk. And we joke, like people always ask us, and I'm sure people ask you too, like, how do you do it? And it's like, well, it's not right or wrong or good or bad, but it either is going to pull you closer or push you farther apart. You just have to be really aware of that. Like we're very fortunate to pull this closer. I could easily see, and there's no harm that it pushes somebody else away. And like we've made a pact, like if it ever does that, like we'll have to back away, or one of us will have to back away. Luckily that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Good for you.
But we worked with this career coach, I guess shortly after we came up with the idea of Bivo, maybe Mark Hohensberg. He's out of Portland, and he has been so great for us in terms of like identifying personalities. So it's not just for me and Robby, but it like has really helped us in managing our employees and like understanding how to work with different people and like analyzing personalities. So that was like very eye-opening when we first met with him, because it turns out Robby and I are like pretty much the exact opposite. We love to do the same things, but like the way our brains operate are very different. I'm much more of a just like, yeah, we'll just figure it out. And Robby like needs to talk through and plan. And it's great because I think like we both have to lean into that to help each other out. So like sometimes I'm definitely more of the like jumper. And as I get older and we have more responsibilities with our kids and the business gets bigger, we're like, it's getting honestly kind of scarier. And so but I have to push myself to still do the jumping because that's sort of my role. And it's kind of cool that we can recognize those things that we have to do for each other and like really lean into our personalities. So
that's her silo.
Yeah,
that's like
that's
your
my
good,
silo.
like if there is a Bivos, our day-to-day responsibilities are getting more siloed. We can speak to that, but I think like that has always been a silo. Like Carina's a jumper. She's a bit more of the dreamer. I'll help sometimes frustratingly poke holes in it and figure out how we're going to get it done.
I'm laughing because you're describing my business partner / wife. Wow. It's funny how that works. From my experience, like you said, it could push you away or it could make it the best thing ever. And I'm glad that your experience has been on the great side. You just speaking to you and hearing about your business, you definitely are a good team. You're obviously making it work very well. And
Thanks.
it's very awesome to see people like yourself succeed. And I just want to applaud you on the good things that you've done and where Bivo is going. I think it's very cool.
Thank you.
Leadership coach, AKA marriage counselor, also a good thing. No, I joke, but like seriously, that was a huge, like just understanding each other and people, employees, that's really strengthened us. So anybody else that's doing it together, even if it's not your lifelong partner, like
just a
that
business
was
partner,
such a skill to acquire. So like we go into now hiring, looking at personalities and like thinking through it that way, where I feel like we didn't do that before. And like, it's all about personalities and then the skills that go along with that person and how it fits together and how you work together. So it's
critical. Like and the more you get into it, the more you learn, and then the more you realize that you don't know. You learn that you don't know what you don't know, or you know what you don't know, because it's deep. How we bring ourselves to work, we get the benefit of getting to go home with our coworker, and blending those lines can be challenging sometimes. So it's good. My last question for you is, and it's something I think about a lot, is how we define success for our own lives, because it's easy to look around and let somebody else's definition of success apply to our own life. So I'm curious how you define success for your own lives and for Bivo.
That's a really hard question. I think that changes too.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I struggle with it sometimes. Like you just said this, like other people's definition of success is very easy to get pulled towards, and that it changes. It's funny. The other thing to comment on, like people ask, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to sell Bivo? Or are you not going to sell Bivo? Like, can you do this forever? Is Svea going to take it over? Like, what's your plan? And I would say that we've created a strategy to be flexible, actually, in that like we didn't go out and get VC funding, and we haven't given up so much control in our business that we're being forced into a sale at an 8-year or 10-year mark or something like that. And this isn't success, but I think it's just like where we're going. Like, do we have the option to hold on to it if we're loving it, or we have the option to sell it if we want to sell it? And I think the beauty there is success can be a little bit fluid, and I think it should be, because it's just like the balance in your life, I guess. And I think that changes. Like right now it is absolute chaos in our life with 2 young kids and a business, and we do thrive on that. Do we thrive on that in 5 years? I don't know. And I think that will probably dictate what success at that point looks like. But being able to thread that and navigate that is like, when having that flexibility, I think that's the success. Like if we can keep maintaining that, that's great. If we can't do that, and it all of a sudden is a year worth of like frustration and like the chaos becomes too much, like, well, then maybe it's time to be looking elsewhere.
Yeah, I would say that I feel that we've been successful with Bivo and that we really love what we're doing. We love the lives that we're living. So like we do have the flexibility to spend time with our kids, and that being a parent of young children is virtually impossible, to be honest, if you're 2 working parents. Like it's really hard. I mean, I think it's pretty similar in Canada, maybe a little bit easier than it is in the United States, but like childcare options are tough. Pickup times are tough. Like how do you have the flexibility to spend that valuable time with your children and also build a career? So I'm like really grateful for the base that we had of having our agency and building our careers that way before we had kids. And now being able to live a flexible lifestyle while like building a business at the same time is pretty awesome. So I'm really happy with I think that for me is success, and I'm really happy in the way that we're able to live our lives.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Well, thanks so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge, and it's really cool to hear more about where you've come from and where you're headed. I think it's a beautiful thing. Very cool product. So congrats on that. We mentioned it earlier, but where can people find out more about Bivo and you guys?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, drinkbivo.com. You can follow us on Instagram. And then in Canada, we're in all doors at MEC, and we're in Bicicleta, and more reps are coming on board in Canada. So hopefully you can find us at more independent shops there as well soon.
Well, thanks so much again for your time, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Christian.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you know someone who would enjoy this episode, please share it with them. If you enjoyed it, take 30 seconds to give us a review on your podcast player. Ratings and reviews go a long way in spreading the word about the show. It takes hours to create an episode and only 30 seconds to leave a review. We'd really appreciate it. To learn more about CORE, visit coreoutdoors.org. That's KORE outdoors.org. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.